like sticks. The water should go up to almost the lid.
It should go over the vegetables, yeah.
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 Okay. Different in color. Yeah. Look at me, I probably got more on the floor.
So when you're fermenting, you are sometimes going to get molds growing on the top of the liquid because it's where the oxygen rich will grow some molds and some fungus. And so some of these have it on there. And this is, I left this to show you what you shouldn't do. So you wouldn't let it get to that point. When you're making your ferments, you want to check them often, and when they start to look like this, or even before that, you're going to want to take that off of there.
Like, does that mean cut those beans? Take them
Yeah,
off
you
and
could
cut
take them off and cut them, yes, and scoop out anything
So
that's
how
in
to
there.
prevent that, you would have kept topping it up.
You could keep topping it up with salt brine,
Yeah.
but you don't have to either. Mostly, the better thing to do is to keep them submerged in the liquid, and these weren't submerged. So, but having said that, this
So that's sort of like a mistake. That's not going to happen.
no, this is good. This will happen to you. It can.
Okay.
But the reason I kept it is to show you that it's still good. You do not need to throw this away.
Right.
You just need to take them out and cut off the parts that are moldy. Throw it away. And this part is absolutely delicious. You can try it if you want, but I won't make you. This one doesn't have any. Actually, you know, where I just tasted, it did taste a little bit like mold. And if you get it tasting like mold, you just feed it to your compost. This is important. If you find molds in your ferments that are bright colors, you have to compost it. It's not going to be good for you.
If you find mold,
That are bright colors.
bright colors,
Bright
like
colors.
orange.
Orange and pink and red. You're going to want to put those in the compost.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
okay for the compost?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The compost has so much happening in it that it takes it can handle anything almost. So anything like this, you know, if they're anywhere from white to gray to like greenish gray to greenish blue, you just scoop them out. And I have already scooped this out. Like it was just sitting in there. This is probably a yeast. And it's growing there because there's so much oxygen in here. So it's totally fine. You just check your ferments every once in a while and you scoop this stuff out of there.
And you keep them in a
And it's no
cupboard,
problem.
or is there anywhere you keep the cans or jars?
If you keep them in a cool place,
Cool.
they generally we keep them on the counter for the first little while, first few days, first 2 weeks, depending, to let it really get fermenting, and then you move it to a cool place. And as you taste your ferments, well, I have to back up a bit. When we're fermenting, it's a whole different kinds of bacteria. It's not just one bacteria. It's a whole communities that become dominant. And as the situation changes in here, more lactic acid, more vinegar, more, you know, because it makes a very acidic environment, increasingly acidic. And so different communities of bacteria will replace each other as dominant. Just like in a forest, you know, if there's a flood and it becomes a floodplain, there's certain plants that will grow up, and they're preparing the soil and the environment for the next group of dominant plants, and the next and the next. So it's just like that. And so as you're doing your ferments, taste it often. And after a while, especially with sauerkraut, you'll discover the time when you like it best. Some people like it really young, some people like it super old. And so when you find it, you love it the best, then you can move it somewhere cool and the fermentation will almost drop off.
Okay.
And then we'll keep it sort of at that stage.
Would you put it in your fridge?
Yeah, in your fridge is a good
And
spot.
does it get tasting less acidic the longer?
No, it tastes more and more acidic.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. More and more sharp, more and more
More
strong.
sharp, and
yeah.
the longer.
The longer you leave it. This is a great way to use old yucky whatever vegetables, but you're going to get the most value from it with fresh, organic, homegrown, picked, washed. Do it right away. You're going to get the top amount. Isn't that good?
Yeah, they are very good.
Yummy.
And you know, sauerkraut, sometimes when you open the sauerkraut vat, it's just like, oh, but it's still good.
Yeah.
And whether food is good or bad to us is a really slippery slope, whether it's, think of cheese.
Yes.
And, some people really love cheese, but I would not even put it in my mouth.
Yeah, then what do you do
Because of
with
the
it?
smell and the look of it,
Still,
right?
Something like that.
Yes, yeah.
No, I can eat that.
Yeah, right. And so ferments are the same way. If you enjoy it, it's not going to hurt you. You can eat it.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Does it need to have air in order to process?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so if you suck the air out of it, then you eliminate
Yeah.
the mold option, but it
Yeah.
still does its thing.
Yes, yeah. Because the bacteria that's growing in these, it's a lactobacteria.
Yeah.
And the lactobacteria can tolerate a little bit of oxygen and it can tolerate salt. But the other bacteria that you don't want really love the oxygen. And so you want to keep as much, and we do that with weights.
Yeah.
Like these
Yeah.
two here, they were done in a big crock,
Yeah.
and then we transferred it from the crock to here for storage.
Yeah.
So that the brine isn't all the way over them, but they were when they were being fermented.
Oh, okay.
So these are kept in a cold place.
And will the carrots stay that crisp?
Yes, they will. But what affects crispness is if you don't have enough salt, and if you keep it in a warm spot, if it's too warm, they can become mushy. So if you make a ferment and it's mushy, next time add a little bit more salt and find a cooler spot. And a note about salt. There are no recipes for ferments. It's so dependent on the bacteria you have in your home, the bacteria in your soil, the bacteria on your bodies, the temperature. There's just so many things that can you don't have control over, right? And so a general rule of thumb is more salt in a hotter environment, and you can use less salt in a colder environment. So maybe in the summer add a little extra salt.
And if you had room in your fridge after you've made them, is that too cold?
I think it is for the first couple days.
Okay, that's when you leave them on the counter.
Yeah, because you want it to
for
get
the first
working.
couple weeks.
Yeah.
But after that, even though you haven't opened them,
Yeah.
you can still put them in the
Yeah.
fridge. So
But
it's not too cold.
that's right. But I do know people who make huge jars of pickles, and she uses a little extra salt for that, and then she immediately puts it in a cool place, like under the house, kind of thing. You don't need a refrigerator; you just need a cool place.
Yeah, but
And then
outside.
they last for years. They can last for a long time, certainly through the year before you have new cucumbers. This one has a weight in it.
A weight.
So there's a glass weight, and it's keeping it all underneath. And this one could have a little bit more liquid in it as well.
And that's something you buy, that little glass thing?
Yeah, the
Okay.
little glass weight. Have you guys been to Anna yet?
No.
No.
Okay, Anna's going to talk about all the different vessels and the different airlocks and everything.
Most of the time I ferment in just regular old jars, and they're really great. They're usually free or cheap. Mason jars are great, or these big pickle jars. And like I said, they're great because you can see everything that's happening, and that's fun as well as just less work because you can just see it. It's a little bit harder to find things to weigh down your ferment in these jars. It's great if it's straight like this is a straight side. And so if you have a weight in it, it's covering the whole surface and there's nothing that's going to be like popping up. Whereas in this jar, we're just using another jar to weigh it down. And so it's only covering the middle. It's only weighing down the middle, which is why we have this cabbage leaf in here, which is holding down all of the sauerkraut underneath it. Because sauerkraut has so many little bits that all want to kind of come up to the top. And so if you put in a cabbage leaf or anything else that's vegetable and like fat,
Is that a cloth?
it's a cabbage leaf.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
These ones, yeah. So they make a lot of nice mason jar adaptable things these days, which are really nice and great. And some of them are fairly expensive. This is it usually has a silicone seal, but it's just a carboy water lock. So it works exactly the same way as this. So you fill it part way up with water, and then the CO2 is able to escape through the water. But then, since there is the water sealing it, there's no oxygen going in. And so these are great because of that.
Now those are kind of a plastic.
They are, yeah. They're plastic, and they fit. I think you can get the lids for wide or narrow mouth, and then these you can get at any beer and wine making store because they just go on top of carboys. And then the lids are the adapter. And these are little silicone airlock lids. They have a little slit in the very top, and these are made for mason jars as well. And so you just use your regular ring on it, and these let the CO2 out. You never have to burp it. And then, like I said before, you always need to have your ferment weighed down by something, and they sell these really great glass weights for mason jars, and they sell them in the wide or the narrow mouth, and they just fit right in, and they're pretty easy to get out. So you just use a fork or a knife or something and pull it out. And if you don't have one of these, you can just look around your kitchen and find anything that would fit inside your vessel that you're using. So I often use a little jar, like also what we're using in here. And if you're using a little jar like this, you probably want to fill it with something so it's heavier. So I often fill it with salt water, like a saltwater brine. If you put a lid on it, it might get stuck. I wouldn't recommend putting a lid on it. Or you can put like little pebbles or salt, like anything that you have that's heavy, or rice or something. And these
And
are,
it just stays at the top.
yeah, it
That
just
would
stays
have
at the
no
top,
lid.
and then you put your lid on top, and it's pretty good. You can kind of just like find what you have, and it'll work. Another fun thing you can do is kind of just create your own weights or anything to leverage your ferments into the brine to keep it submerged. So I've heard of people using like carrots that they like bend, and or like something like this that is like pretty much the same size as the jar that you can like really push in. It's not heavy, but since it's tight in the jar, it'll hold it down, which is great.
Do you have one of those packers, or do you just use your hand?
Yeah, Mika has a packer.
Yeah.
I often use my hands.
Yeah.
He has big hands, so his hands don't fit in, but like my hands fit in these jars, so it's not a problem. And of course these ones and these ones, they have pretty big openings. And when you do ferment in jars, most of them have metal lids, and the metal isn't very good for your sauerkraut and it just tastes bad. So we usually put a plastic bag and just cover it with that to make it not.
Even the canning, even that.
Yeah, because the salt makes it rust too, and it just tastes really bad. And these jars, they are airtight, and so like I said, when you ferment, it creates carbon dioxide, and so the gas needs to escape. And so if you tighten it really tight, your jar could explode. And so you do need to like burp it every couple days or every day. It really depends how hot it is.
Okay, then you do not want to put one of those things on there and suck the air out, because then it will keep and it'll blow your jar up.
Yeah, it might. Yeah. So with these jars, you just can like loosen it every day and just like go like this and put the lid back on, and that's
Should
it.
it be tight though, quite tight when you don't burp it?
Some people do so that the oxygen doesn't go in.
Right.
I usually leave my lid halfway
So it constantly is.
so
never
it's
needs
constantly
to be burped.
escaping. If a little bit of oxygen is getting into your ferment, it's totally okay.
Fermentation plays such a broad role in nutrient cycling.
Yeah, I've never had a problem with it, with the jar lid just being like this.
But if you do tighten it, then you should just loosen it.
Yeah, and you'll be able to tell because the lid will be like, you know, the little button on the canning lid will be like this, and you won't be able to push it down,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to tell there's gas in it. And if it pops like this, then it's fine.
So, salt, cabbage, and water. For this process, even just salt and cabbage. The salt will bring out the juices of the cabbage. We're gonna chop it fine and we're gonna massage it, so we're gonna break the fiber a little bit. And the salt, by doing this and adding salt, the cabbage will release its own juice. The salt is also important for stabilizing the fiber so that it doesn't go mushy. If we don't add enough salt, let's say in the summer, then another kind of bacteria will kick in and make it all soft and mushy. Another thing it does, salt, it creates the perfect environment for the lactic bacteria. It likes salty environments because then it can outcompete other bacteria that would otherwise spoil the ferment. And the fourth thing is, it makes it last for a long period of time because it slows down the fermentation. Yeah, yeah. So, how you cut your vegetables is entirely up to you. The thing to remember is the coarser you cut it, the less surface you get. And the more surface you have, the finer you chop it, the more juices you're gonna release. So I prefer a medium, but it's really up to you. I sometimes, in some jars, I cut some thick, some thinner, other jars I cut them all thin. I experiment with it because it's your own journey, you know. You're adding your own touch to this. So, but generally speaking, I would take like a cabbage like this, take out the core, and then just start chopping it like as finely as you can. You could also get yourself one of these mandolins. They do a fantastic job. The ratio salt to cabbage, it varies to your taste. Like if you can't, you could even make it without salt by supplementing the salt with, let's say, celery juice, because celery has a lot of natural salts, and that could substitute your salt if your doctors told you that you can't have it because of high blood pressure or whatever your condition, you know. Otherwise, I myself use very little salt. But there is a danger. I have a lot of experience and I like sauerkraut anyway, whether it grows molds or not. I just take it off and I eat it because I love it, and I know that there is no harm done by these molds, unless they flavor unless you leave it for too long. But Karin will talk about when to take, in case they develop, when to take them off, and then there is no chance for the mold to inhabit your whole crop, right? And if it's just on the surface, it doesn't matter. So, but for your benefit, we decided to use about a tablespoon of salt for a pound of cabbage. I use a teaspoon. But so here I have about half a pound of cabbage. So I'm going to chop this all. If you have your own garden, the best thing is to use your cabbage from there. If it's not infested with any bugs, I wouldn't even wash it, because all these vegetables all already contain the bacteria that we are looking for. And so if you wash it too much, you'll wash all that off, and so that it'll take longer for the whole process to take place. So so this is a pound of cabbage. I'm going to put a tablespoon of salt on here, sprinkle it over it, and then you take your hand and you knead it, and you'll see it is. After about a couple minutes, it will release its juices and start to get all watery.
That looks like about a good amount to work.
Yeah.
Pound at a time.
Yes. But it's fairly easy to do that. It looks like it's hard work, but even in larger quantities, it actually, once it starts to release its water, it goes really fast. Yeah. I like to work with my hand, and also your hands contain the bacteria that you want in there. So you see, now it's really wet. It's really wet, and when you've come to this stage, now you can add onions and other spices that you might like juniper berries are really good in there, or caraway seed, or a bay leaf, or some chili, or ginger. Yeah, experiment with it. It's like the flavors that you like. There's no exact recipe. So this jar has been sterilized. This is very important, to sterilize your jar.
In the oven or?
It would boil. You know, when you
Can you put it just through the dishwasher? Well, that's
if you have a dishwasher, that would do it. I usually put a tiny bit of water in a pot, put this upside down, bring the water to a boil, and then leave it for 5 minutes, and the steam will sterilize it. Yeah. When this has released its juice, then you start packing it into the jar. Yeah. And then what I do, I have these ones also chopped. And so I toss a couple slices of that in, and then more sauerkraut, more of this. You could put beetroot in there if you wanted, or sauerkraut, and then you probably have small enough hands to reach in there. I don't. That's why I have one of those compounders. Kain's mom gifted it to us. I don't know where she bought it, but so what we do with this, we're compressing this. We want to get as much air out
It would be nice to have one of those.
as we can. And you see, so this is what we want. We want the vegetables to be submerged in their own juice, or in the salt brine. And by compressing it, we get all the air out, because lactic bacteria is an anaerobic bacteria. It doesn't like oxygen.
Okay.
And because oxygen will support harmful bacteria. This is why this is so safe, and this is why when you make sure that everything is covered in salt brine, there is no danger of contamination. You cannot get sick or kill yourself with a ferment, no matter how disgusting it looks. There's no chance. As long as you take the top layer off, it's fine. Okay, for the purpose of demonstrating, I'm gonna leave this aside now, and I'm gonna also show you how to make the ferment that uses just salt brine, because these vegetables you can't squeeze any juice out of them unless you grate them. What I found with beets, because they contain a lot of sugar, they ferment wildly. So if you do beets, you have to make sure to leave a lot of airspace between the end of the salt brine and the airlock.
Do you have to burp the jar?
Yes, and you have to burp the jar, because jars can actually explode from the buildup of carbon dioxide. This is what's happening there. As the bacteria digests the sugars, it burps carbon dioxide, and it needs some release.
Once a day or once a week? Or?
Yeah, once a day, or with
a day?
beets even twice a day.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you'll see, like if you put a lid on like this, the juices will kind of come through the thread, and it'll mess up your counter unless you put it on a plate or on a saucer or something, that to catch the juices. And then when this happens, you also have to have a bit of salt brine on hand to refill, to top it up, because what happens here, as it ferments and as the juices escape the jar, they actually get exposed. It lowers the liquid content, so you just refill it and make sure it's all submerged.
Just salt.
And just salt and water. So we pack just as we want it. With carrots, if you make sticks, you got to make sure they're not too long, right? So we want them about to here, because we need some room at the top.
Oh, and you didn't peel the carrot either. That's great. For some reason I always peel carrots. My parents never did. They washed them, but not
Right. So you pack them in, and as you can see, you leave about an inch between the lid and the actual vegetable. When you've packed your vegetables all in there really tightly, like as many as you can get in there, and with carrots it's easy because because they're all uniformly sliced, you can really wedge them in. And when they're all in, then you fill up the jar with this salt brine, just so that they're covered.
How much salt did you put in that size of a pot?
Here, there's a tablespoon per half liter of water.
So that's in the booklet.
That's in the booklet. And these measurements are all in the booklet. So you don't have to memorize the salt.
I knew how far I could go.
Yes. So I'm just demonstrating to you how we do this. So this would be all packed with veggies, and then you cover them with salt brine and put a lid or an airlock on. Anna will cover all the different ways of the jars that you can use, and
And how long do you have to leave it? Like when I make the sauerkraut before we eat it?
okay, a minimum of 2 weeks. After 2 weeks you can start eating it. You can taste it after a week.
Yeah.
But you have to leave it a minimum of 2 weeks and up to 6 months.
To get all the benefits.
I've got a jar
Yes.
in my garage of sauerkraut I made 2 years ago.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, that's absolutely, it's good. It's
Probably good.
what happened, like over a long period of time, the vitamin C deteriorates. Right? As long as it's fermenting, the vitamin C is also present. Once it stops to ferment, the vitamin C declines.
Yeah.
So it is always best to eat it within a reasonable amount of time, right? But you can still eat it after 2
Right.
years, and you'll still have the beneficial bacteria in there. In terms of vitamins and minerals, it's not perfect
Right.
anymore, but
I just forgot about it.
yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to label things. And
Labeling is
I
good.
have too many rows of it.
Happy fermenting!
Happy fermenting!